Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Candid Connect. I'm Alicia Crank with Northwest Washington Civic Circle, and we are starting off week 2 with another Candidate Connect. And today we're being joined by Glenda Krull. Hi, Glenda, how are you?
Hi, Alicia. Good, thanks.
So, Glenda is running for position 1 for Edmonds City Council. And before we get into it, Glenda, let us know who you are.
Um, well, thank you for having me, Alicia. I appreciate the opportunity. I've lived in Edmonds for more than 25 years. I actually moved here 32 years ago and got my license as a real estate broker. I moved from Meadowdale to Seaview and then ended up where I am here in Edmonds in the Bowl. Um, I have lived here where I am now for about 15 years. And I love living in Edmonds. I love everything about Edmonds. And I am committed and involved in Edmonds. I've been a member of the Chamber of Commerce for about, many years. I want to say like 8 to 10 years. I sit on the board. And right now I am chair of the chamber, which gives me a front row seat to the current struggles and frustrations of small businesses. I volunteer in Edmonds. I'm on the board for the Edmonds Center for the Arts, and I'm one of the sponsors for the gala. So, like I said, I know this community and I'm really committed to it. I also sell real estate in the area. I've been real estate broker for 32 years. I work with families, seniors, builders, developers, first-time buyers, help them manage the biggest investment of their lives. I serve in a leadership role with the Board of Realtors. I am on the board for the Snohomish County Camino Association of Realtors. I am a director with Washington Realtors, and I have been a director with the National Association of Realtors. So with that, we work across the political aisles to advocate for housing rights, balanced growth, property protection. I sit on the Government Affairs Committee for Snohomish County. So I also sit on some endorsement committees. So I do that also. I've been attending city council meetings for over 10 years. That's about 500 meetings. And I have watched Edmonds go down this unsustainable path, with major budget deficits, residents of Edmonds mistrustful, and all of that. So that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's a lot. You like I was like, where are you gonna find? I get that question, like, where do you have the time to do all of this stuff? And it just kind of gets entrenched in everything else that you do. It becomes a
Yeah,
part of who
it
you
does.
are. So
Hmm.
I totally get that. I used to be on the chamber board moons ago, so
Right. I remember
I
that. Yeah.
yeah, like I don't envy the work that you're doing, but I appreciate that you're doing it because
It's a lot of fun. Just being out in the community and volunteering for the block party, formerly known as Taste, and car show, and going to the Connect, Edmonds Connect, and the breakfast, or in the morning buzz. I mean, those are all very enjoyable, and it is good to connect with other business people in Edmonds. And some of them come from like Shoreline or Linwood that are members of the um, Edmonds Chamber, just because that fellowship is really important. Connecting with other like business members is great.
so you talked about how you've seen kind of the budget deficit issue kind of go the downward trajectory. When do you think that started? Because I know that's kind of a hot button question as well. It's kind of like, when did this all start? Is it just this current administration, the one before it, the one before that? And there seems to be different answers to each time that's asked.
Well, it's hard to say because I've been going to meetings. I think I've had 3.5 mayors and maybe a couple dozen or maybe a dozen or so city council members. And it seems, you know, I remember Vivian said the budget deficit issues have been going on since 2008. And so I really started going to these meetings in 2016. So I wasn't aware of as much as what's going on as, I started to get after I really started going to the meetings, reading the packets, and then talking to people, engaging more about what was going on in the city council. So for myself, I would say 2016 when I started going to meetings, 2000 end of 2016, beginning of 2017.
Okay. So you've lived here long enough, and that's usually one of those buzzword questions is how long have you lived here? What makes you qualify? If you lived here less than 5 years, no one wants to listen to you. But clearly that's not the case with you. But I want to ask you, why now? Because you've been here long enough and you've seen these trajectories, right? You've seen kind of how, and I'm just going to say since COVID, right? Is that,
Yeah.
it's been such a challenging time for everybody, not just Edmonds specifically, kind of navigating a new normal, whether it's financial, obviously financial stuff came into play when everything had to shut down and CARES Act funds and all these other things. And it just seems to have opened up other issues because of that. So would this probably be maybe one of the most trying times to run for local office in
Yeah.
Edmonds? Why now? Like what if with all the it's not like you're bored because you got a ton of stuff that you're already doing. You're already very fully ingrained and in positions to influence policy and other things in the community. What made you decide in all of this crazy, I'm gonna run?
Well, that's a good question, Alicia. And it is like walking into a buzzsaw. I will be honest with you. Um, at the beginning of the year, I started getting phone calls from people. Hey, why don't you run for city council? And I'd say, no, why would I want to do that? I go to those meetings and shoot, I don't feel really well while I'm sitting in there. Why would I want to be up on that dais? Well, then the phone calls really started coming, and then neighbors would stop me in the street and ask me. And then I would have clients who seemed to be involved in what was going on because now you can watch by Zoom. So I think you get a bigger audience that is paying attention to what's going on. And clients would call me and say, hey, what about this? And were you at that meeting? And they'd ask me questions and then they'd say, why don't you run for city council? And I was like, no, I'm not going to run for city council. Mm-hmm. Well, it got to the point where I was getting a lot of phone calls and a lot of emails and a lot of texts that finally I think it kind of dawned on me one day when I realized, oh my gosh, the only thing I really want to do is grow old gracefully in my house. I do not want to have to leave my one-story small little house here because I can't afford to live here. And that's when a lot of the budget stuff was coming down, and there was, people were assuming that things that were on city council agendas meant we had to sell parks, things like that. And then I just suddenly said yes. I said yes. I shocked myself, but it was, can't remember now exactly when I announced, but I think it was in April that I finally made the decision to go ahead and do it, and got a tremendous amount of support from all of those, especially those that were pounding on me to go ahead and run for city council. And so I got everything organized that I could, that you're supposed to do, gathered a team and did a kickoff and went from there.
Yeah. And you definitely have some notable endorsements as well. I forgot to do the screen grab to post them up, but a lot of notable names in the community, individuals, whether they're, already electeds or former electeds that were here, business and community members. There's a question I have for you, but I have a statement first. And I want you to take this in the purest way that I mean this. I know I've been trying to couch it, but I'm going to ask you just because I got so many people emailing me a version of this question, but I want to give you context before I ask it to you.
Okay.
So the context is, for some, when the last mayoral race happened, there seemed to be a sense that the challenger, who is now our current mayor, ran on a position of I'm not the other guy. And there wasn't a lot of him saying what his strong positions were on a lot of different things. So people didn't know until he got in. And then some people felt like, wait, what happened here? We didn't know that this was the case. Mm-hmm. And so the question that has come up a number of times for you for this conversation was, what are your hot button topics and how do you want to address them? Because I know on your website, there isn't anything on there that I saw that was about, I'm for this or I'm against that, or I support this or I'm against that. It's very much you, which is great. But I think since some folks felt burned the last time someone kind of campaigned that way.
Oh, sure.
And especially now because we are in such a financial crunch, there are people that are more clamoring for, I want to know what she's about. I want to know what she's standing for. I want to know those things that drove you to say, okay, I'm going to say yes and run for council. So are there hot button topics for you? I'm sure Levy Lift is in there somewhere, but are there topics for you that you want to talk about and say what your positions on them are, at least right now?
Sure. That's a good question. And I can appreciate that. I think the way that the city has communicated or not communicated with the residents is a huge hot button. I mean, I talk to people who say that they're frustrated, that they don't feel like the city council listens to them, that they go up and give their 3-minute presentation and they look at the city council members and maybe one or two is making eye contact with them. Those are the kind of things that are really important to me because I've been up there and I have spoken there before. I've written letters to the city council members and gotten responses back like, let's agree to disagree. I think a really important part of why I am running is I want to engage the public more in how their tax money is spent. I mean, we've spent many years of making some poor decisions and bad ideas, and this is where we are. Now, I realize that inflation has a lot to do with it. The cost of living has gone up, things like that. But I have sat back there and watched the majority of the city council vote for things that in the long run did not go very well for everyone. And that is very frustrating to me. So I feel like there's a disconnect between city government and the residents. They don't feel heard. They don't feel seen. They feel like there's another agenda up there. They think there's no transparency. And that's another issue. They're not provided with a lot of information that they feel they should before they make an informed decision on something. I know one thing that's a hot button with a lot of people is the fact that the city hires PR firms to help move their agenda, which seems very unfair to the residents because then they feel like they're just being told what the city wants them to hear. They're not given both sides of any issue. I mean, I sell real estate, and what I do is bring buyers and sellers together, and then I've got to bring the other broker together too. I mean, you cannot do that unless you are transparent, unless you are presenting facts, unless you go out and get the specialists to come in and do what you really can't do. I see the city trying to be a land developer, and they're not land developers. They should have brought in a specialist to help them with the landmark property, and they wouldn't do it. They would not do it. And I wrote letter after letter about the landmark debacle and was completely ignored. I offered I had commercial brokers email the city council and say, let me help you with this purchase.
And so for the lay person that might not know what the landmark deal is, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, the landmark was the Burlington Coat Factory property that the then mayor and a couple of city council members were very passionate about purchasing it off market and making it into a community center. The seller wanted 38 million off market, which was a lot of money for an off market property. And I was able to get a hold of the purchase and sale agreement and look at it. And I realized it really wasn't written in the favor of the the buyer, who was the city of Edmonds, there was not what appeared to be a feasibility or an inspection contingency. There was a clause in there that the city could renew the efforts to continue with the purchase in December, I think, of 2023.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of money spent on marketing, on city staff doing presentations, models about what a great idea this is. We're going to turn it into this, and we've got the city of Shoreline and the city of Mount Lake Terrace that are going to partner, which was untrue because I did ask them. It was really pushed. And then in December of 2023, when the city was given the budget was in deficit for 2024, the city council had the opportunity to pull back from that purchase and sale agreement or to continue it. And the 4 out of 3 city council members voted to continue on with that contract into 2024. Well, the city lost their earnest money. They lost $100,000 earnest money, which with a $14.5 million levy list seems like a drop in the bucket. But it was more than just that. There was a lot of money spent on staff, marketing materials, time, a lot of conversations about that particular piece of property. Had they had a commercial real estate broker represent them, I don't believe that ever would have happened. And I don't think $38 million off market was really such a great price anyways. I do believe it is still in the ownership of the original owner that we were going to purchase it from. So, I mean, that kind of thing is really frustrating. Why take on a project like that if you're not a land developer? For goodness sakes. I mean, I don't suggest my clients buy a house unless they get a professional in to take a look at it, because I'm not the expert and neither are they.
That's the second reference in as many days from someone I've interviewed that referenced the house analogy, but it's true, right? So you touched on this a little bit. So let's just jump into RFA. So what was your position on the RFA before it was voted on? Were you pro or not?
Well, I did not support the RFA because it didn't make sense, in my opinion, and based on everything that I had read and the people I talked to, I didn't come to that conclusion on my own. I did ask people. I did go to the city council meetings. I thought that the costs were too much money for the homeowners, and there wasn't a guarantee of a better service in return for the RFA. The fact that we were going to lose local control and decisions about our fire and EMS didn't seem like a really good idea either. A good example is what happened recently in Mill Creek with the RFA. The RFA decided it was cost effective to close down the Mill Creek fire station without ever going to the city of Mill Creek and letting them know what they were going to do. They didn't talk to the mayor, the city council, or even the public. And they announced it at a city council meeting. And when they did that, everyone was up in arms. They were going to close down the Mill Creek fire station and work out of the Martha Lake fire station. That there was a lot of drama around that, months of drama. And finally the RFA said, fine, we'll go. We won't close the Mill Creek fire station. And so that was a good example of why I was mistrustful about it. And what also bothered me is that the city, they pushed very hard for the RFA and hired a PR firm to sell the RFA to residents using our taxpayer money. And to me, that wasn't very transparent. It was more like marketing. So I didn't appreciate that, and that, helped solidify my decision all the way. And then it just didn't seem like a good idea. And it did pass because I think because of all the marketing that they did do, they had the advantage to do that. And I think that is absolutely unfair.
And then so now that kind of dovetails into the current levy lift that's going to be on the ballot in November.
Right.
What do you take on that one?
Well, I realize the city of Edmonds needs something. And I know that they need some assistance from the residents. No one's denying that we have challenges, but this levy is asking residents to make up for years of, like I said, poor decisions and bad choices. Um, the real issue is, how are we going to manage taxpayer dollars? I mean, right now, Edmond uses some outdated budgeting practices, and I heard today that actually Edmonds is trying to bring their budgeting departments, you know, monitoring the departments and how they are tracking progress, things like that, how they're spending and measurable qualities or measurable results, that they're actually going to be updating the way that they do that. But they haven't done it in the past. They didn't tie spending to measurable results or track the progress that was going on. So a lot of money, in my opinion, was wasted on um, nothing. There, I mean, it was going into a black hole pretty much, um, which left the public in the dark about what was going on. How are our tax dollars being spent? I know that neighboring cities like Linwood, Bothell, Shoreline, they have modern systems, how they connect budgets to good outcomes or even outcomes that aren't good. Um, and I just feel like we're paying for the fact that the city of Edmonds didn't do that. And there's a lot of mistrust between the residents, businesses, and the city.
How do you talk? Thank you for that. And for those that are watching live, thanks for watching. And if you want to put a comment in the comment section, you can, or a question, I'll see it. And if it's a good question, I'll ask it. Um, Speaking of taxes, and this is one of the questions I'm asking all the candidates. Right now, I think that there is a sentiment in the city that they're feeling taxed, as in taxed physically, taxed monetarily, because you have the within a significant short amount of time. Because you have the RFA, you have the potential levy lit lift should it pass, cultural access sales tax, which I know has gotten delayed until after the election, and there's some drama around that. Then potentially also a B&O tax and parking fees. You think we need to do all that?
Well, as a sitting council member broke on your podcast last week, we don't. That's a game changer, I think, in my opinion. A lot of people are talking about what Council Member Chen said last Friday after the budget retreat. You know, the bonds, there's money there to keep the city going, is what people are talking about right now. I know that people can spin anything any way that they want so that it is their narrative is one that's believable. But I think that did raise a lot of eyebrows when he said that. And it's almost as if it's a game changer now. Wow, do we really need 14.5 million? Could we maybe?
I gotta say, I was stunned by that, and I think that was someone that does kind of follow stuff a little bit more closely than others, but that was like a what?
I mean, apparently we've got some huge remaining reserves out there and some bonds, and there's a multi-year path out of debt. And so that makes me wonder, what else don't we know?
Well, what does that? But I would say then, what does that look like for you then? Now I'll ask the same question I asked him, even though now we kind of know what his answer was, which is what happens should the levy lit lift not pass? Because even before I asked him that question on Friday, when I posted to others, one of the things I brought up was that Everett last year also put one of those on their ballot and it failed. So my question was not necessary. So for those, some people messaged me and was like, "Oh, that was like a gimme question." I'm like, no, it was not, because other cities in our arena have tried to do this and fail. So what would happen if it failed here?
I think then everybody's got to go back to work and figure something out. Actually, they do have to figure something out, because we may be able to sustain for a while, but it's not going to last for a whole long time, obviously. I think that there needs to be some other ideas brought forth regarding the budget. I know that one group came in and gave their opinion on the budget that led to the 14 and a half levy lift. But I know that there's other residents out there who are smart, who have done this for a living, are anxious to present a budget that they think makes sense also. That I think maybe we should embrace that right now instead of just looking at it from one side. I think that the city has not taken the time to actually bring in additional ideas and information that might help come to a different number for the levy lift that makes more sense, that doesn't create such a hostile environment in Edmonds right now, which is what it seems to be.
Mhm.
It's unfortunate that people say that seniors and disabled people can certainly get a tax reduction, and that's not true. A lot of our seniors make $1,000 to $2,000 more than what the requirement is to get a reduction in their property taxes. It, that's not fair to go around saying that they can get that, because they can't. Many cannot do that, but they're going to be priced out of their home at $14.5 million levy lift. There's got to be another number that the city of Edmonds can live with and still accomplish what it is that they want to accomplish.
I'm thinking of doing another one of these things based on what you just said. Like I know that there's been some um, conflicting statements back and forth around seniors, and I work with the senior population now. So of course I'm thinking about that just in the workplace as well. So I might be calling upon a couple of folks to come and do this with me to kind of talk about both sides of that, like why one group is saying that they can get these and some that cannot. So again, I think there's just a lot of information out there and it's getting lost.
It is.
We have an audience question that just came in. Let me see if I can do this right. It's the first time I've ever tried to do it this way. Yes. Hey, Ann Christensen. So she just submitted this question online. So speaking of staff time, can you speak to the city not joining with Mukilteo to avoid the state's new density regulations?
The mayor of Mukilteo wrote a letter to Olympia asking for relief in having their downtown area of Mukilteo, along where the ferry is, not be designated as transient orientated, and because of the fact that it's not the ferry isn't a commuter ferry. It's ferry for people who live on Whidbey or live here to go back and forth. And I know that the mayor had reached out to Edmonds and said, hey, I realize you have the Sounder and you have the ferry down there, but the Sounder has less than 8,000 people that actually ride it per month. And the numbers, from what I understand, are going down. So it's hard to actually qualify our area down here by the ferry and by the train station that we're actually a transient orientated city, which with our critical areas, shorelines, things like that, there was the possibility of getting some relief from the state mandating that we put in as many housing units in those areas and increasing our density. I don't know how that ended up, but I don't think that letter was signed by our mayor. I don't know for sure, to be honest with you.
And that was news for me. So I'm gonna have to go and do my research after this conversation so I can see what that's about. But thank you, Anne, for submitting that. So let's talk a little bit more about kind of budget, financials, and community assets. And one reason why I had this as a series of questions was because there's a lot of new people that have thrown their hat in the ring to run, and a lot of them seem to have been kind of activated, for lack of a better word, initially with what was going on with Hummingbird Hill Park and Francis Anderson and Big Red, the tree, and then everything else that kind of came after that. And so community assets, if anything, has shown that even in the most partisan of situations that people can bridge that gap, because park usage is not partisan, right? Being able to use, community facilities should not be a partisan issue. But those are things that have been coming up and what has ignited certain folks to throw their hat in the ring, which I think is great. And it's also great that once that bit of whatever was done, then and when it just kind of go back into their holes and say, okay, I'm done. They're getting more involved. Are there community assets? That's not the question I want to ask. What do you think will happen with community assets should all of these taxable things don't happen? And what I want to do is show this from the city's website. And again, barring Friday's big announcement, or big boom, is, on the city's website, it talks about what would happen if the levy failed. And one of the things that stood out to me as I was rereading this today is the word would, right? If the levy failed, how would services change? So custom parks and rec maintenance would be eliminated. Not could, not might, but would, which seems very definitive to me. Do you think do you feel like that's the case, or what would happen?
Well, personally, I don't think that everything on there is going to happen. I mean, based on what Will said last Friday, let's be honest, he said that the city would be fine or something to that effect. I know that the city is really good at pushing an agenda to support what they want to have done. And it's not just me saying this, other people I've talked to, they feel like these are scare tactics by the city of Edmonds, like they did with the RFA. No one's going to come to your house if you don't pass the RFA. You won't have anybody to put the fire out in your home, type of thing. Because this sounds very similar to what they were saying then. I have a hard time believing that every single thing on there are going to eliminate cultural services and police reductions. Now, our police budget since 2019 has doubled. Why is that? We should undouble it, in my opinion. As you can see, I have the former police chief, Al Campan, who's gone ahead and endorsed me, and he still shakes his head to this very day. Why did the police budget double? What was the reasoning behind that? Did we have to hire a bunch of people? Did we suddenly have some outrageous crime spree going on in Edmonds? So I think, and even on Facebook, you see sometimes people have talked to public works people who say that they were shocked they were told not to cut the lawns in the parks, things like that. That kind of stuff gets said and it gets repeated over and over and over. And oftentimes, I'm sure by the time it gets so many people over, it gets even bigger than it really was when it started. But I just don't think that all of that's going to happen. I really think that is a scare tactic, in my opinion.
Well, time's gonna tell. All right, we're gonna go into some more audience questions. These are people that have emailed in questions as late as a few minutes ago to some that sent them a couple of weeks ago. So we'll go into Christina M's, and she wants to know, what 3 action items will you recommend to increase the city revenue stream?
Well, here's a fun thought. Why don't we reduce sales tax a little bit? And then everyone would come to Edmonds to buy their cars. They'd come from Seattle. They'd come from Everett instead of going to Burlington or Puyallup to purchase their vehicles. Let's do that and think of the revenue that would come in from the car dealerships that we have in Edmonds. We also
that's a good. Actually, you just made me think of a question. I thought all the car dealerships were Linwood. I didn't know any of them were on Edmonds side.
Yeah, we have Campbell Nelson.
Oh, that's right. Okay, thank you.
And Linwood
Honda. I learned something as well.
Okay. And Linwood Honda, but that's Edmonds. Yeah.
No.
And there's
I
some
always
other,
have the trick where I tell
you drive
people,
up and down Highway 99 from here to Costco. There's a lot of car places.
But I think we get confused because sometimes, like, on one side of the street is one city and another side of the street is another, or half a block away. But thank you for that, because for some reason, I thought none of them were on kind of the Edmonds side. But thank you for that.
That would be we could bring in some revenue that way. Tourist dollars, obviously, a lot of people come to Edmonds because they want to, do a day trip to Edmonds. They come from Seattle or, north or south or east or west. But we could do more to make it easier for them to stay here. Obviously, we have a hotel that's coming in the next 5 years, and that's great. Uh, you know, Parking for the people who come to Edmonds to visit, I think paid parking for them is not a bad idea. They come here and take our parking spaces up and spend the day here. Why not charge them to do that? There
So
could be
you
a
are
revenue,
pro paid parking.
right?
Okay.
There could be a revenue stream from that. Highway 99, I have talked to several businesses on Highway 99 that are very frightened about an additional B&O tax coming on, and some of the smaller ones on Highway 99 don't think they're going to be able to survive something like that. So raising B&O tax and adding additional sales tax could really have the opposite effect of raising any more revenue for the city of Edmonds if we aren't careful how
How
those
does
businesses are able to do that.
how does that affect bid at all?
The building or the business
Yeah.
district, the
Yeah. Like
business,
with that, 'cause I know
yes,
they already pay into that.
they
The
do pay into
that
that, and it's a section of downtown Edmonds. It's a, it's kind of a sectioned off area, and it's
right,
hard. I personally don't understand bid that well for that, but they do pay extra to be in that bid district there.
right.
Um,
So they would be subject to the B&O tax too on top
right.
of okay.
Yeah, there are different ways to increase revenue stream, but what you can't do is time businesses and merchants' hands to actually do that by taxing them so much that they can't afford to stay in business. So, paid parking, more tourist revenue, and don't increase the tax. Like I said, let's reduce it, see what happens.
Oh, interesting
That's kind
deployment.
of out of the
I might
box,
have
but
to follow that line of thinking. I don't think this okay. Anonymous wants to know, especially with your real estate background, what are your thoughts about expanding the Edmonds March to include? Oh, that's not the question I wanted to ask. We're going to ask it anyway. What are your thoughts about expanding the Edmonds March to include the Unical property, or do you have other ideas for that?
I don't know enough about the Unical property. I
Just
know that it
honest.
is in the process of being cleaned up right now. Um, Here we are. I mean, are we going to be in the middle of a purchase and sale agreement on that too? I'm not so sure I would be excited about the city spending revenue that they don't already have to purchase that property if that's what they would have to do. But like I said, I don't know enough about the Unical property
But
to answer
do
that.
you have any thoughts on expanding the March though in general, or do you just think it just needs to be where it is right now?
I think it needs to be where it is right now. I think maybe in the future, but we need probably some revenue to help make it bigger if we're going to do that. And we don't have any revenue right now to do things like that.
Now here's the question I was going to ask. This is from Susan P. Okay, so what is your position on creating more affordable housing in Edmonds? It's a situation most of the communities in the region face.
When we talk about affordable housing, we have to recognize that affordable means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. What's affordable mean? $1 million house is affordable to some people, and a $500,000 house is affordable to somebody else if a $500 house exists. For some, it's about being able to buy a starter home or keeping rent within reach. In Edmonds, we need to be very thoughtful how we add density because we have so many critical areas in Edmonds, and we have to protect what we have. Now, we don't have the infrastructure to support density, in my opinion, if we have a wastewater treatment plant that still doesn't work correctly for the residents that are using it right now. I think first we have to make sure that we have the infrastructure to support what we're doing as far as density. We have to be very thoughtful about it. When I was in Olympia with the other realtors on the Hill talking to our elected officials about these housing bills, before we left their offices, we turned to them and said, if it makes sense, and do no harm to real estate. If we start carving up parts of Edmonds to put in more density without thinking of what we're doing to the neighborhoods, then I think we're doing the wrong thing. I
Mm.
sell houses and condos in Edmonds to people coming from neighborhoods like Ballard, Kirkland, that want to live in a community where not everybody is parking on the street so that you can't go down the street. I just recently sold a condo to a couple that said they were tired of going out to their cars on the street in the morning and finding the windows smashed, because that
Mm.
kind of density just seems to breed nefarious behavior. They want to live someplace where they've got a driveway to park in and maybe a garage, but at least a driveway to park in. Not having mandates, for multifamily to have parking doesn't really seem to make a lot of sense right now. It's not as if um, our residents don't need a vehicle to at least get up to the light rail to park so that they can take the light rail to Seattle, not to mention the plumber that's coming to their residence to fix the
Mhm.
plumbing has a vehicle.
Yeah.
So does the home care professional that comes to see the senior. They've got a vehicle. Making them park blocks and blocks away to carry all of their stuff, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And it adds costs onto the services that they provide if they have to drive around for 30 minutes to find a place to park. So, why, yes, we need to create some housing in Edmonds. Honestly, I don't think it's ever going to be considered affordable with the cost of property, the cost of permitting, the holding costs after that, because it takes forever to get permits done in an orderly fashion. I was talking to someone who just purchased a business and took his plans in. He had about a month's worth of work to do. It took 9 months before he could open up his business again because it took so long with the city of Edmonds for permitting. He
Mhm.
said it would sit on someone's desk or somewhere for weeks, and they'd tell him he needed to make a tweak, and he'd say, why didn't you get a hold of me before? Because I'm carrying all these costs now that are affecting me in a detrimental way. So yeah, we do need more housing in Edmonds. We need to be careful where we place it. Highway 99, I know people say, well, it can't all be up on Highway 90. I'm not suggesting it be all up there. But if you are going to create housing that is quote unquote affordable, you're not going to be able to do it down here. I mean, the developers are the only ones who are going to win this
Mhm.
fight for housing when it comes to purchasing property and building multifamily or building homes, skinny homes, 3-story homes, block after block after block. They will never be quote unquote affordable.
You touched on something I want to ask you a question about, and it is going back to business. And you're in real estate. You're on the chamber board. You're the chair, so you're used to working with small and medium-sized businesses. What do you say to those who feel as to those business owners who feel like they don't get nearly as much attention from council or our city government in general if their businesses are not in the bowl? They feel like the bowl gets all the attention, all the things, and those that are not in the bowl. So not even just Highway 99, but Perrinville. you know, uh, there are business owners that feel like they don't get a fair shake. How do you speak? How do you address that with those business owners?
Well, implementing a
Coming from your
B&O
experience
tax,
in the
right,
chamber, right? Because
right.
it's
Well, implementing a B&O tax probably won't help them. That'll probably hurt a lot of them because they are small businesses and their margins are very um, narrow. Not to mention, this has not been a great year for many of the merchants. I do think that the chamber does um, incorporate those that belong to the chamber on those in the outskirts of Edmonds. Like the sushi restaurant on Highway 99, Kazuko. Um, the owners come, Sumans come to many of the Edmonds Connect events. Um, we were thinking of having an event there at uh, her restaurant even. So I do know that, we do talk to people on Highway 99. We do talk to people in Perrinville and other parts of Edmonds. There does probably need to be more engagement. I will definitely admit that. But it's difficult to do that at the same time while you're talking about charging them more tax on their
Right.
product and services.
What about bringing like activity or events? Um, so I told this to another person I interviewed earlier on, was that I used to live right off of 99 at 236 and 99. And it's like as soon as I left is when actually good stuff started to happen. Like they ended up doing like a series of the summer markets up there. They had, it's gone now, the satellite city hall office
Oh
was,
yeah.
up there. So kind of during the pandemic, for better or for worse, South Edmonds got some attention and they got some love. And then as quickly as it was there, now it's gone. And there was no announcement about it. There was no saying, oh, we can't afford to do the summer markets again in South Edmonds. It just stopped. And so I think there's a lot of disenchanted residents in that area going, okay, that was a pacifier. Are you guys going to come up and do stuff with us again?
Well, a lot of those programs and things like that really depend on if we've got a budget to do it. And according to Edmonds, we don't. So getting some more revenue in, regardless of how we do it, is not going to necessarily fix all those problems, but it is going to help make it easier to go out and do those things. But we don't have, apparently, from what we hear, we don't have a budget that supports doing that. It all really stems on the fact that we don't have money. We don't have money to do these things, and wanting to do them, and wanting to engage and do them is wonderful. Heart is in the right place, but if you don't have the funds to actually do it, how are we going to do it?
My final question for you before I let you have the final say. You already touched on half of this question, but I wanted to get more specific with you on the second half. This is from Nora. Hi, Nora. Why did you decide to run for office, and which you've already kind of talked about, but what specific skills will you bring to the council?
Well, I've sold real estate for 32 years. I've worked, I know how to manage my own budget, or I wouldn't still be selling real estate. When the market's great, I put money away because the market's not always going to be great. So I live within my means and I prepare for growth and I adjust my marketing accordingly. And I've been doing this 32 years and I'm still doing it. Um, I have also been on the board of realtors for, all 20 some years. I've been a realtor for all 30 years, 32 years, but I've sat on the government affairs committee. I've talked to all of our Snohomish County, some of King County, because part of Bothell is in Snohomish County and King County, and our state legislators. I've got a relationship with them. I talk to them about housing issues. It's important to me that we be able to have those conversations and still have those conversations with our elected officials, because a lot of what we do from a local standpoint does affect us county and statewide. So I've sat on government affairs for many years. I've been a key contact for uh, different senators. I negotiate contracts all day long. And it's not just a buyer and a seller, it's the other real estate professional. I've successfully maneuvered through that for 32 years. I work on referral only right now because I can. I get referred out to my clients, family, neighbors, residents. That's how I do my business, based on my reputation of being able to successfully help someone with the biggest asset, one of the biggest assets of their lives. So I think I can bring that skill of negotiating and finding different ways to do things. There and also know when to bring in a professional to help navigate through, not try to negotiate our own purchase and sale agreements. The city is not a land developer. They really shouldn't be doing that. They should hire professionals to do that. They can get a commercial broker to do it who's got vast amounts more of experience doing it. I think the city needs to know when they need to take their hands off of certain things. And I feel that we need to be careful of how we spend our money and how we talk to the residents to be more transparent. I talk to people all day long. That's how I make my living. I go out there and I make the ask all day long.
Okay, true final question. So one just popped up. So true final question. But I think this is a good one now.
Oh, sure.
Often when people are running for office, it's just by a default position. There's always is always saying, here's what I will do. If I am elected, I will do this. When the reality is you got to get a majority, right? It's no lone one person that can come in and change anything if you don't have, in this case, 3 others that will go along with you. So I know you've cited some of the concerns and issues and things that have happened, and some of those council members are still going to be on council.
I understand.
How do you propose to go about kind of bridging that gap and working with some of these other council members that maybe you haven't necessarily agreed with their decision making, but you also know that nothing gets done in favor of what you want to do if you don't have that majority with you?
No, I appreciate that. You do have to actually be able to have a conversation about everything that you're working on at the city council level. I appreciate that. I think that it's important also to respect each other's views, but to actually suggest that there might be a different avenue or a different course to take and back it up with facts or some kind of metric that supports it too. I think that the council members are smart people. They're not up there because they just fell into the position. They need to be critical thinkers. And I do think for the greater good of the city, there is a way to everybody to get along and make some decisions. And you're right, not everybody's going to agree on everything. Shoot, I've written so many letters to the city council that I'm sure some of them were just rolling their eyes after a while, but I did engage in meaningful dialogue with several of them. I even had lunch with a couple of them over the years. So it's not impossible to do it. I think there are some bumps that are going to happen along the way, but I do think that they can be smoothed over with just actual dialogue, with direct dialogue about these things and communicating with each other. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, with that, you get to close us out. So your final thoughts you want to share with everybody?
I did not take it lightly to run for Edmonds City Council. Not at all. I have a day job, but I do have the flexibility with my day job to actually be a committed city council member. And that's what I really want to do. I have no political agenda. The only agenda I have is to grow old gracefully in my house. And I want to make that really clear. I'm not doing this to further myself along politically. I'm running a grassroots campaign. I'm not taking any PAC money. I'm running it nonpartisan because the position of a city council member is nonpartisan. I didn't even take any money from the realtors or the master builders because I only want to represent the business people and the residents of Edmonds. I'm passionate about that. I want them to know that I have their best interests in mind. That the city council is not a place to get political. Nowadays, it causes a lot more division than it does any kind of camaraderie. That's for sure. And I want to be really careful that I do walk the walk and talk the talk of being partisan. I am not trying to bring a politics into any of this. This is about solving problems that Edmonds has. It's about coming together and making good decisions for the residents, all residents of Edmonds, and having a diverse um, a diverse conversation up there on that dais, bringing different ideas from different people that gets to the heart of the matter, and that is representing our residents.
Okay. Glenda, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. I've learned so much. I really have. So thank you. Thank you everyone that's been watching live. And we're going to do this again tomorrow with Janelle Cass, who is running to retain her seat on the Port of Edmonds District 1. So hopefully you'll join us again tomorrow. Take care, everybody.